friends and fellow citizens, good evening and aloha. I'm Congressman Ed Case, proudly representing Hawaii's 1st Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. As you know, Hawaii has 2 congressional districts and 2 congressmen, currently me and my full partner, Congressman Kaili'i Kai Kahele. My district, the 1st Congressional District, stretches from Makapu Point on the east, all the way through the city of Honolulu, central Honolulu, out Pearl City, and then up to Mililani and Mililani Mauka before coming back down through Waipahu, Ewa Beach, Kapolei, Ko'olina, and ending at Kahe Point. That district is really urban Honolulu, and there are 750,000 people that I represent in the 1st Congressional District. Congressman Kahele's district, the 2nd Congressional District, is the rest of the state, so the rest of the island of Oahu and everywhere else in the state, and he also has about 750,000 constituents. But together, and we do act together, we represent all of Hawaii in the U.S. House, and we are the only 2 representatives for Hawaii in the U.S. House. Like every single other time I've ever done a talk story, I believe it's critical to doing my job that I stay in touch with you, that I let you know what I'm doing on Capitol Hill, 5,000 miles away for most of the year, talk story on the issues that we're facing, listen to your concerns and answer your questions. I really wish that this was personal all over again, as I've done so many times. I wish we were sitting in many, many school cafeterias and community centers and other event areas throughout my 1st Congressional District, but obviously COVID-19 makes that difficult, and so therefore we must do this again virtually. Jackie let you know some of the basics of tuning in and asking questions, and I'll repeat those from time to time. But I want upfront to direct you to my website at case.house.gov. There's a whole bunch of information at my website on case.house.gov. Much of what I'm going to talk with you tonight about is on my website. There's information on COVID-19, information on my agenda, on my actions in Congress. My voting record is there, and important information on how to get in touch with us by email or by calling us at our Honolulu office at 808-650-6688. That's on my website. So I want to refer you there early and often in tonight. Obviously, I'm coming to you tonight at a very, very difficult time for our communities, for our state, for our country, and really for our world. The difficulties are all around us every day, all day. Of course, COVID-19 rages on throughout our country and our world. Our economy and our communities are shaky at best. We have very, very difficult issues that we're facing in Washington, D.C., some of which I'll talk with you about tonight, and I'm sure you'll raise them with me. And finally, our world is a very, very difficult, a very, very dangerous world. And it's a critical time for our country in our world. And, you know, I think it's pretty obvious to all of us that with all of this comes very, very high levels of frustration, of disappointment, of anger, of division, of polarization, of even fear. And all of that makes it very, very difficult sometimes for us to talk together as fellow citizens of our country and our world. It sometimes makes it very difficult for us to carry out a civil political discourse in Washington, D.C. And yet we've got to do that. We must try to do that. We cannot descend into yelling and screaming at each other across an increasing gulf. We have to try to sort it out together. We have to try to make these decisions and find the best way forward for all of us. And certainly for me, I have to move beyond it. I have to make these calls in Washington, D.C. And if I'm making these calls simply by reaction to anger and frustration and resentment and polarization, I'm not doing the right job for you, and I'm not doing what I need to do in Congress. You know, when you represent 750,000 people, you agree with some of the people pretty much all the time. You disagree with some of the people pretty much all the time, too. And hopefully you agree with most of the people most of the time, but it's never going to be a perfect match. And yet somehow I have to find a way to discharge my responsibilities to represent each and all of you, regardless of whether we do or don't disagree on issues, to find the areas where we can at least find common ground, and where we disagree, that I explain to you what I'm doing and why. And so I ask you, as we go through tonight in this heightened atmosphere, let's all show each other a little kukua, a little courtesy. Let's try to have a civil conversation with each other, just as if we were sitting in the school cafeteria somewhere. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about my job and some broad stuff, and then focus in on three issues that I'm sure you want to talk about, and then I'm going to turn this over to you for questions. First of all, I always think about my job really in three buckets. The first bucket are the parts of my job where it is my responsibility to make decisions on behalf of our country in the U.S. Congress. These are national decisions, decisions on national policy, on international efforts. That's one important, critical part of my job. The second is to help Hawaii, all of us in Congress, to make sure our federal government is responding to our needs here. And then the third part of my job is to help you and yours with your concerns, whether that are questions you have of your federal government or simply you communicating what you think to me and me answering your concerns. Those are the three parts of my job. And I just want to cover the latter two of those before I come back to the national issues, which is where so much of our attention is currently. So let me talk to you first about my obligation to help you and yours with your own individual concerns. We sometimes refer to this as casework in my office. And even in a non-COVID world, casework is always very, very intense. But COVID-19 has made this a particularly intense time for us to try to help you and yours with your questions. By far, the biggest question that many people have had is unemployment insurance, accessing your unemployment insurance, what you're entitled to, when you're entitled to it, why aren't you getting answers from the unemployment office, which is operated by the state? And those concerns continue. We've also had a great number of concerns and questions throughout this past 18 months with assistance to our small businesses, assistance to you individually with stimulus checks that you've all received, or most people have received as a result of our federal action. Those too continue as a major part of our efforts on your behalf. But we have others that are coming up now in increased importance, where we think that we can especially try to help with questions, with efforts to try to sort things out for you. We are seeing right now the end, for example, of the federal supplemental unemployment program, which has helped out many throughout the last 18 months. That is ending, and it in all likelihood, to be straight with you, is not going to be continued. And that's going to cause a whole range of issues for folks because some people have not received the unemployment benefits that they're entitled to under the federal government. Those will still be considered. Some people want to know, obviously, what exactly can be expected. We want you to contact us with those questions. Similarly, we have had in place for most of the last 18 months a moratorium or pause on any evictions for folks that are not paying their rent in their places of residence. Both the federal and state moratoriums have now ended, and that is causing a great increase in questions as to what you do in those situations. And we are here to try to answer those questions, although the what you do in those situations is mostly a matter of state and county law and regulations and efforts, and at this point, access to federal funding, which is being directed to rental assistance through the state and county governments. We have increased requests for help with immigration and passports, where many of our consular offices around the world have been closed down for all of this time, and people now want to have their loved ones visit them here or to go visit their loved ones overseas. We can help you with that. We have increased needs in our veterans benefits, where essentially because many of our service records have been very, very difficult to access, we have a backlog in new veterans benefits. We are trying to sort that through at the bigger picture by funding increased people to go through those records, but we can help you with your veterans benefits. Similarly with Social Security and with the Internal Revenue Service, because taxes have been very, very confusing. Again, we've helped thousands of people in all of these areas, and if you can think about a concern that you think we might be able to help with, give us a call or contact us by email. We'll try to help you out. I want to address helping Hawaii because whether COVID-19 is here or not, that's always part of my job. Most of that occurs for me through my service, continued service on the Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for federal funding every year, COVID or not. We are responsible for funding somewhere in the range of $1.5 trillion per year. And we've been very, very active this year throughout COVID-19 to put together our federal funding bills for our country for the fiscal year that starts October 1st, just in a few weeks. All of those bills have been considered and reported out of our Appropriations Committee. I was successful in getting many, many good projects in there for Hawaii. You can access, by the way, all of my work on the Appropriations Committee off my website, again at case.house.gov. Go to press releases there, and that'll summarize it for you. But clearly, that's been a critical part of my job throughout, whether it be our defense industry here, which was our number one industry throughout the last 18 months when tourism went down so severely. Clearly for our economy here, including tourism, our social services, education, environment, natural resources, a whole range of other issues where I try to help Hawaii through my service in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, COVID-19 has had incredible demands here in Hawaii that we've tried to meet at the federal government level. Those are about 5 or 6 major bills over the last 18 months that I've talked to you about before, and I think you're familiar with: the CARES Act, other acts, the American Rescue Plan, most recently in March of this year, with a total of somewhere around $5 trillion of federal emergency assistance. The result to Hawaii has been somewhere in the range of $20 billion of federal emergency assistance, which is whether it's to businesses or to our governments to help them out with their needs, or to you directly through direct payments or federal unemployment. That's really been critical, and much of that work continues. Those funds are still coming from our federal government. They are still being distributed here. I mentioned, for example, renters assistance. And as you can see from the papers and the media, also your state and county governments are making decisions right now about where they're going to allocate the federal funds that are still coming to them. So those are the first two buckets, the helping Hawaii and helping you. Let me now turn to issues of national concern, where my responsibilities are to try to make the right decisions for our country overall, together with my colleagues in Congress. And I would cite 3 issues to you that are top of mind, I think, all around. First, of course, we can't avoid COVID-19, which, of course, is still increasing in many parts of our country with the Delta variant, and now even new variants, the Mu variant, that has now been identified in almost all of our states, which is potentially problem, as was and is the Delta variant. We've seen higher rates of infection, hospitalization, and death since January, even since January, and in some cases throughout the entirety of COVID-19. And I've said from the very beginning, back in February and March of last year, that for me, the decisions had to be guided first and foremost by the advice of public health professionals that know public health, know epidemics, know pandemics, know healthcare, know what works and what doesn't work. We couldn't make these decisions based on the political whims or desires or fights of the moment. We couldn't make these decisions even based upon or what they may or may not do from the perspective of our economy and businesses, or what we just did and didn't want to do. We had to make those decisions based on what the public health taught us we had to do to get through this pandemic. And the public health has been consistent really throughout. It's no surprise, we all know this. Try not to gather in large gatherings, wear masks wherever possible, and get vaccinated. That's been consistent from the very beginning, not just because not doing so is a risk to ourselves, but because it's a risk to others, because it risks our healthcare system, which here in Hawaii is at total capacity now, total capacity. And any increase, as we fear from Labor Day, would put it over capacity and cause very, very difficult decisions to have to be made, where we are not only unable to serve those with severe COVID-19, but unable to serve people with other healthcare issues who are being displaced from our intensive care units throughout the state. And so that advice stands. There is nothing in the public health documentation that says anything different today than it ever was. That getting widespread vaccinations is the key to getting through this. Here in Hawaii, we've got a mixed result going, as you all know. We've got about 86% of our population 12 and older now who have at least one vaccination, about 75% fully vaccinated. That is not top in the country as it was at one point. And we have huge areas where we just are not having sufficient vaccination. Some of these are neighborhoods with their particular issues. One huge area, by the way, is age. The younger of us are not getting vaccinated when the older of us are, even though it's widely available. And these pukas in the vaccination coverage are causing illness and death, and they are causing widespread community disruption. Somewhere around 96% of the cases of COVID-19 in Hawaii today, or in the last couple of months, are among the unvaccinated. The younger are particularly impacted. So the idea that somehow we're invincible from COVID-19 when we're young, that is absolutely wrong. Young people are getting sick and they are dying. And that's the fact. And so, number one, in COVID-19, your federal government is not, for the most part, directly involved in the mandates at the state and local level as to how we get through COVID-19 from the perspective of restrictions or requirements of who must get vaccinated to serve in the armed forces or to go to work. Those decisions are being left to the individual businesses, to our military in that case, to our federal government and employees, state government, and to our state and county governments in terms of the restrictions. But the federal government certainly has a role in it. We have funded the means necessary to get everybody vaccinated. We are funding today an incredible increase in the number of emergency nurses throughout Hawaii through our Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA. We are doing what we can to support our state and county governments and communities to get through the public health side of this. But ultimately, those decisions are being made. And I believe that as and when and how those decisions are based on the public health, they are the correct decisions. And where we are not making the right decisions, it's because we are, and I'm talking about the entire country, not making decisions based on what is the advice of the public health professionals. So that's my take on COVID-19. We can get through this, but we need everybody to do what public health advises to get through it. Let me talk about Afghanistan, the second huge issue that we all face right now. Of course, the end of a 20-year war was deeply tragic. It was troubling. It was confusing. There was so many questions. And I think, certainly the time for questions is going to come. I think I would say two things right now to you. First of all, we must, at this point, pause, take a step back, and simply remember, reflect, and thank the 800,000 of our fellow citizens who served in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, the 20,000 who were injured, and the almost 2,200 who died in Afghanistan, including just 13 just in the closing days of the war. This is the time when we can all step back as Americans, regardless of what we think about that war or about the exit from that war, and recognize that the true cost of war, and recognize that many served there towards our mission in Afghanistan, and they deserve that respect and remembrance and thanks. And I express that tonight in every which way I can. The second thing I would say is that I think where we need to focus our complete energy right now is on completing the mission of ending that war. We evacuated in the weeks right before the exit, the final exit, some 123,000 from Afghanistan. Many of them were American citizens, but the vast majority were not. That was one of the largest, if not the largest, evacuation in history. Those folks that were evacuated are in temporary shelters around the world, many of them in military bases throughout our country. They need to be processed. They need to be, located somewhere else. We need to finish that job, and I think that's where our energy needs to be directed. We also have a tremendous amount of people still in Afghanistan, to include American citizens who wanted to leave and could not leave, but including tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of others who want to leave Afghanistan, who were our interpreters, our partners, our allies, our friends. They fought with us. They advocated on the basis of democratic values, and they're at great risk right now. And we need to continue the job of trying to get them out as well. My office, for example, has been deeply involved in trying to get out specific people who serve with some of our forces from Hawaii. For the last 3 weeks, my staff has stayed up virtually nonstop to try to arrange those exits, and I'm not alone. Many of members of Congress are doing that. So although I think the time for the questions is going to come, and every war needs to be analyzed, every exit needs to be reviewed. To overly politicize this right now, I think is a huge mistake. I'm not going to go there myself. I'm going to ask the questions at the time, right and appropriate times, and in the right and appropriate ways. But for now, my focus is on completing the evacuation that is still very much outstanding. Finally, let me talk about two huge bills that I face right now in Washington, D.C. And these are referred to collectively as the infrastructure bills. These are two huge proposals. They come out of proposals by President Biden early on in his administration several months ago. There is a lot of misinformation on these bills out there. I'm just reading my correspondence every day, listening to the questions I get, and it's very, very clear that there's a lot of stuff out there that is twisting and turning this all around. There are also areas of disagreement that are apparent between me and some of you that I want to address here directly tonight, because it's possible that you're acting on misinformation, but if you're not, then at least I can explain my thinking to you and how I'm approaching it. So I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about these two bills. There were two large proposals, and when I say huge proposals, I'm talking about proposals at the size and extent that have never been proposed before. Truly, as referred to by some, transformative, generational, revolutionary. That all adds up to very, very large and very extensive. And obviously, one key question when we take these in their totality are, is that the right direction we want to go for our country, just as a matter of our federal government's involvement? I think for me, the answer is mixed. Yes, in some areas, and I'm not so sure in other areas. But two of these proposals, one was a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, physical infrastructure. So this was the largest infrastructure package ever proposed in Congress. $1.2 trillion devoted to physical infrastructure, so roads, bridges, sewers, water pipes, harbors, airports, the physical, tangible stuff that we think about as infrastructure. But not only that, to include, for example, renovating our VA hospitals, our veterans hospitals, some of our schools. Certainly a major transformative investment in the internet infrastructure, where we saw in spades during COVID-19, it was critical to distance learning, to distance business, to distance medicine, that you had a workable internet and equipment. And so that was the first bill, $1.2 trillion physical infrastructure. Then the second bill was $3.5 trillion for what is often referred to as social infrastructure. So not so much the physical side of things, but some of our social programs, significant expansions of our social programs, in some cases creating new social programs. These included areas such as the extension of the federal child tax credit, which was a specific COVID-19 limited extension of the child tax credit, substantially increased paid family and medical leave, free education at both the pre-K level as well as in, for example, our community colleges, expansions of the Affordable Care Act and the healthcare expansion, changes in Medicare, changes in Social Security. As proposed, these added up to $3.5 trillion, certainly transformative. And one thing that President Biden said from the beginning was that these bills should be paid for, meaning that they should not be financed by further borrowings by the federal government in those amounts. We have, as I said earlier, borrowed $5 trillion in the last 18 months for COVID-19. And so President Biden was basically saying, I'm not proposing to borrow another $5 trillion. And so when you pay for something, what that means is you have to find revenue to support those huge expenditures, whether it are changes in our tax codes or changes in other programs that are reduced or eliminated to offset those amounts. So in other words, balance the budget on these bills. That's what he said, and he made some very specific proposals about how to pay for these bills. The two main proposals that he made were to revert the corporate tax rate to the level that it was before it was significantly reduced during the Trump administration, and similarly to revert the personal income tax rates for high income individuals, 400,000 or more per year, to the pre-Trump reduction levels. But he did say pay for them. Frankly, both of these bills had very long odds of passing in Congress, a deeply divided Congress, a Congress in which, as you know, in the U.S. Senate, the split is a 50-50 split, with most bills requiring a 60 vote margin in order to pass. And so these were really, really critical bills that, frankly, weren't given all that much of a chance of passing. But amazingly, because of the involvement of both House and Senate members, as well as the president, acting on a bipartisan basis, the $1.2 trillion physical infrastructure bill did pass the Senate. In fact, it passed 69 to 30, substantial pass. And that was sent to the House, and it's sitting in our lap right now. All we need to do is to pass it, and it goes to the president, who says he would sign it into law at about $1 trillion. Now, some, including my own leadership in the House, wanted to hold up. They want to hold up the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the $1 trillion bill, until the $3.5 trillion bill was completed and also passed. I disagreed with that very directly. I disagreed with it on 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 grounds. The first one was, I think when you get a bill that passes all around and is agreed to, you got to act on it right at that time, and you got to pass what you've got in your hand. Second, 75% plus of this country supports that particular bill, to include the folks that I represent, according to a survey that I sent out. Third, I think any delay in passing that bill risks losing it. And finally, just from a Hawaii perspective, that bill would probably yield somewhere around $2.5 trillion of major infrastructure investments to us in Hawaii. So I disagreed on that, and those discussions by me and others led to a decision in the U.S. House that we will vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill on or before September 27th. And I'm hoping and believing that on September 27th, it will pass the House and be sent to the president. And we can all reflect that at least we got one huge thing done for our country, even on a bipartisan basis, which is worth something as far as I'm concerned. Now, as to the $3.5 trillion bill, which is often referred to, or sometimes referred to as reconciliation, which is a process, a very rarely used process under which you don't have to get 60 votes in the Senate. You just have to get 50 votes in the Senate to pass it. So you would have to pass the House on a simple majority and then 50 votes over on the Senate. By the way, that means you would have to line up every single Democratic senator to pass it, the reconciliation bill. That is how the $3.5 trillion social infrastructure package is proceeding right now. Now, it's a huge bill, and frankly, I don't have, nor does anybody else have, the details of that bill, even sitting here today. The only details I have are pieces of it because they're in one of my committees, Natural Resources. We are in the middle of considering our piece of that bill. But if you have questions on the details of it, it's difficult for me to answer because I haven't seen the bill. It doesn't exist today, and so it's very difficult to make that call. I can say generally that I support much of it. I support many of the goals of that bill. I support many of the very specific points, at least as I understand it, from President Biden. Some of it I just have to ask myself, is it really critically needed? For example, there's a proposal that the federal government should pay for community college for everybody. And I ask myself, well, is that the right thing to do with so many needs out there? If somebody can afford to pay for community college, should that be a free one, given other needs that I think are more critical than that? I certainly believe in that when somebody is truly in need and has no other options, but I'm not sure that that's the right way to go for every single person. It's one of those things that, sure, it sounds great, but once you start to narrow in on the focus and on priorities, maybe it doesn't work so well. And then finally, is it paid for? I am critically worried about our national debt and deficits. We've increased that from 23 to over $28 trillion inside of 18 months. I am in the category that debt and deficits matter. I know there are people out there that don't think they do. I'm not one of them. And I think it catches up with you in many different ways. We're not out of COVID-19 yet. We may well have to spend a lot more money that's borrowed to dig us out of COVID-19. And so I think where we can pay for these programs, we should. I support the president's general proposals, for example, on corporate and personal taxes. And so this isn't a matter of not wanting to implement those programs, but I am focused on paying for them. And so basically need, priority, and pay-fors are what are going to influence my own decisions on the $3.5 trillion package and reconciliation in the next few weeks. There's other issues, but frankly, I've gone on way too long already. I'll mention briefly campaign finance reform, H.R. 1, which I co-sponsored, just sitting in the Senate right now. We have major needs for voting rights legislation, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that I co-sponsored that we just passed out of the House. It's sitting in the Senate. And then we have an absolute terrible decision by the state of Texas, severely restricting a woman's right of choice to the point that I think is unconstitutional under the Supreme Court's formulation. And I think the Supreme Court will decide that when they actually take the case on the merits. But in the meantime, we have a major bill that's going to be before us in the House in the next few weeks that codifies the right of a woman to choose within limitations as set forth in Roe v. Wade, that I think is the right thing for our country. And I don't think that this should be left to individual states anymore. So with that, I'm gonna stop, and before I turn it over to you for your questions, simply thank you again for spending time with me tonight. Thank you for your own input, for your own partnership. It has been an incredible honor to serve you, even in this difficult time, and I look forward to staying in touch however we can. All right, as a reminder, again, to participate in the talk story, if there's people that are out there that can't yet, although you're probably already participating, just dial 855-274-9528 and follow the instructions. And to ask a question, please dial star three. You be put in the queue. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to just start from the top, and I've got a question here. And by the way, we're going to start with some personal ones, and then I'm going to just try to whip them because we probably will run out of time. So Rex from Pearl City on technology and vaccines in the schools. Okay, I'm not hearing.
Hello?
Oh yeah, Rex, go ahead.
Right. With the technology of it's not necessarily vaccines. With the technology that is available, especially with the dry peroxide that is being instituted with a NASA base, as well as being used in the last 10 years within the space station. Why can't we get this in the schools? I know it's funding. There's possibly one. Because it's been proven in the aerosol form to kill COVID within 3 minutes.
Okay.
And if it's not a UV light, yeah.
Okay. Appreciate the question. I think I don't know enough about the technology that you are discussing. I've heard some of that. I have to kind of assume that it is because the folks that are actually, deciding on how we're running the schools have some questions or concerns about it. That's all I can really guess at right now. But if you need to try to get further answers on that, give us a call and we'll try to sort through it for you. Okay, I'm going to go to Gene regarding the infrastructure bill that is stalled, especially with Hurricane Ida exposing. Gene, do you want to go ahead and ask in person, or is that good?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes. These infrastructure bills, one of them anyway was passed in the Senate and then of course went to the House. But it's just that they're just sitting there. Like you said, you're going to vote for it. I hope so soon. And with these past few storms that have come by, and then we also have the fires of California, and who knows when that hurricane or tropical storm will hit Hawaii. We desperately need these bills because the bridges and roads and everything are just falling apart, and the Hurricane Ida really exposed that.
Well, thank you so much, Gene. That's actually my point exactly on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The $1 trillion largest infrastructure investment ever is, like I said earlier, staring us in the face. It's just there for the taking amazingly because it's very, very difficult to get anything out of Congress, especially on a nonpartisan, bipartisan basis. And President Biden himself, after the devastation of the recent hurricane, made the comment that that was exactly why we needed the physical infrastructure package ASAP. So I think he kind of made the case that I was noting earlier, which is that we ought to grab that bill and run with it right now. Many of the provisions in that bill would go directly to some of the critical infrastructure needs that were exposed by these natural disasters, whether they be wildfires or hurricanes or any number of other natural occurrences. And by the way, that's before you even get into the big picture issues of climate change, of climate resiliency, which is going to be a massive investment by each and all of our parts of our country to deal with. As we know right here in Hawaii in spades, rising sea levels are devastating our coastlines, are causing major transportation challenges for us, and we need federal help on a massive scale to try to address some of these macro issues, if I can put it that way, that are related to climate change. It's not going away. And so that's why I made the point earlier that I believe we should vote on that bill right away, and I'm looking forward to doing that on or before September 27th. Okay, let's see. I'm going to just read this. Deborah doesn't want to speak live, but she says hopes the delay in the Navy to reinforce the tanks at Red Hill will be addressed since the aquifer needs to be preserved. Well, I completely agree with you that our aquifer does need to be preserved. In terms of Red Hill right now, there are a number of things going on. I think, first of all, the Navy and the state of Hawaii, as well as other parties, are awaiting a decision by um, uh, a an administrative judge, for lack of a better way of putting it, on whether the Navy can continue its permit to operate Red Hill, and if so, under what conditions. And so, I think a lot of clarity will be offered when that decision is made, and all of the parties have to adjust to it. In the meantime, the Navy has committed to what's called secondary containment, meaning basically a wall within a wall. It thinks it has some good solid answers. I'm helping fund the research for that, which is being done in partnership with the University of Hawaii. Through the appropriations committee, the Navy has spent somewhere in the range of $600 million in the last few years on maintenance and upkeep at Red Hill. So I think it's taking it seriously. But frankly, we do have to find the answer on secondary containment, because the status quo is not going to work over time, and the Navy itself recognizes it by saying that either it's going to solve that problem or it's going to have those tanks removed by 2045, which is still a long time. But I think things are, focused in the right places, and again, there are various processes that are going on that I'm trying to help out as much as I can at the federal level. Let's see. Felicia, you asked about the reconciliation bill. Did you want to go ahead? Yes, hi.
Good evening, Congressman Cage. Yes, I am interested in asking about the reconciliation bill, particularly because it includes child care and elder care. And I believe that many, many people in the state of Hawaii need help with both of those issues. I understand that the bill hasn't been written. I know there's a lot of contingencies on how the bill is going to be funded. And I understand that, but I think that your constituents really need a commitment from you that you're going to support the reconciliation part of the bill. The human infrastructure is the physical infrastructure is really important for our state. I do know that. But the people of Hawaii are really struggling, and we need as much help as we can get. And I believe both bills need to pass.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. So a couple of responses back to you. Like I said earlier, I completely agree that the so-called human infrastructure or social infrastructure bill is critically important, as well as the physical infrastructure bill. So I've always said that I believe that both bills should pass. Like I said, I do believe that the bill that's ready to go should go. And as to the reconciliation bill, it's just impossible for me to make that commitment. I'm just not going to commit yes or no to a $3.5 trillion bill that I don't know the details of. I agree with you on the importance of the programs that are proposed by President Biden. But at some point, I think that there are going to have to be judgments about which of those proposals can, in fact, be implemented, on what basis it can be implemented, and on what basis it is paid for and doesn't add to the national debt and deficits. And by the way, I think that the revenue proposals by President Biden would support a substantial reconciliation bill. So this isn't a matter of not believing that we do need a generational investment in many of these programs that I agree with you are critical. But frankly, I need to see it, and I need to participate in its development. Again, I've tried to reach out to you and my other constituents to understand your thinking. I've surveyed off of my e-newsletters on this issue, and I think I'm speaking for I guess I would call it the mainstream of my constituency here. But that's my take on it. It's impossible for me to make that commitment today. I hope that I can vote for it, and I think I will be able to vote for it, by the way. So I think that will come up, and I think it will pass, but I don't know what form it's going to look like. Let's see, Leighton on the Jones Act. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes. What is your stance on the Jones Act?
Okay.
How do you feel about it? Do you think it's important that we keep it, or do you think that if we release it and open it would help the country any?
Well, I object to the Jones Act as it applies to Hawaii. I think that one could, I guess, make the case that the rest of the country, and by the way, just quickly, the Jones Act for everybody is a 101-year-old federal law that was passed back in a different time and place that basically says that when you ship between two U.S. ports, so for example, Oakland and Honolulu, which is our major shipment of everything that comes here, you have to use U.S. flagged ships. Now, that would be, I guess, okay if you had a lot of U.S. flagged ships, but the fact of the matter is we're down to under 100 for the entire country now. And the reality is that what that does is create a monopoly on the shipping lanes between the U.S. mainland and the island parts of our country. Now, that's not okay with me, and you and everybody else are paying significantly higher prices because you are paying for that monopoly. You are not paying, world shipping rates, which are competitive. You're paying monopoly shipping rates as a function of federal law. And so, yeah, I disagree with the Jones Act as it applies to Hawaii. Now, if the rest of the country wants to keep it, that's, I guess, their business. At least they have opportunities like buses and trucks and trains and other means of moving stuff around. So it's hard to kind of grab onto the lifeline of a place in that context. But we suffer from the Jones Act, so that's my position on the Jones Act. That doesn't make me very popular with the folks that operate the Jones Act ships, but I think that's the right thing for all of us here in Hawaii. Let's see, Colleen, stimulus checks. You want to go ahead?
Yes, I want to know if in this next bill, will there be stimulus checks again? And they've been talking about either another one or monthly to help us.
Yeah, Colleen, to be straight with you, no. I think the answer to that is there aren't any proposals in the current bill that we are addressing right now to provide another round of direct stimulus payments. We did 2 full rounds during the middle of COVID-19, of course, in the original CARES Act. We did a large, I guess I would say not large itself, but a substantial direct stimulus payment to most of the country to help folks through a very difficult time. And we came back and did it again the second time at the end of last year because COVID-19 had not gone away as fast as we had hoped at the very beginning. I think that the thinking right now is that as most of the country has generally recovered economically, and as jobs have come back, and as there's been some stability around COVID-19, the need for a general stimulus payment to everybody, regardless of individual need, is not as significant as it was. However, in the same breath, of course, we are still funding various programs that are designed to help people in direct need. So I don't think we're walking away from people that are still in great need. But I think the honest answer to you on the stimulus payments itself is unless we really see COVID-19 taking the whole thing again, we're probably beyond that chapter at 2 stimulus payments. Calvin, on Afghanistan.
Yes, Mr. Case, I've been a resident of Hawaii over 55 years now. I'm a retired Navy commander, Navy Reserve. Okay, I've heard the situation that we're experiencing as far as the Afghanistan situation is concerned. We're turning over $83 billion worth of taxpayers' money to the Taliban there in Afghanistan. This money, if it were taken and used for other important investments, in our military, would provide for over 1,000 F-35, the most expensive and the most best aircraft that we have in the entire world, could be paid for that amount of money. In addition, if we're a Navy person, we could see that money could be expensed for a total of 8 aircraft carriers that we could put into the Pacific to help keep the homeland here safe. I don't know who needs to investigate this situation, but the idea of turning over $83 billion worth of military equipment to the Taliban in Afghanistan hurts me as a military veteran right to the core. What can you do, or what can you say about this situation?
Well, I think first, Calvin, I would thank you for your own service. I think that I can't imagine what many members of our military and our veterans communities are thinking right now as I said earlier, not only the end of this war, but the way in which it ended. And I'm not going to defend the abandonment of significant military equipment in Afghanistan. The fact is that as I sit here, don't really know the conditions under which it was abandoned or why. As I understand it, the material was, what's it called, sabotaged by our forces to be unusable. I don't know that for sure, but I've heard it. I also suspect very strongly that, like everything else that occurred in our exit from Afghanistan, although we did plan to leave, and I supported President Biden's decision to leave, nobody expected the Taliban to take power that fast. It drove tremendous needs on the ground that I can only imagine. And I believe, to your question, Congress does have an obligation to investigate, to oversee, to provide oversight, to try to get the answers to the questions that we all have, and to try to find some answers and guidance for future such situations. I think that's our obligation as a country. There are too many questions, and they need to be answered, not only for legitimate oversight by Congress, which is our constitutional duty. They need to be answered for future lessons. All I'm trying to say is that what I don't want to have happen, and I don't intend to participate in it, is what I perceive to be really a very overly heated politicization of all of this in a very difficult time when we still have people to evacuate, including American citizens, when we've got a lot of stuff that we need to achieve to not make matters even worse. And so I'm not downplaying what you're saying, but I'm saying there's a time and place, and I don't think this is it. Let's see, Greg, on HOAs.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. My question is, there are HOAs, mine in particular, that is able to foreclose even though my VA is in forbearance, and I'm just curious if there are programs that I'm not aware of, or what the state is doing to help mitigate that, and how many other people are going to be affected. I might be so unique that it doesn't matter, but I just think it's pretty, I mean, it's extremely inconvenient, but I think it's pretty disrespectful in the process. That's my question.
Yeah, Greg, I think I understand your question, and the answer is I don't know. I think what you're referring to, if I'm not mistaken, are HOAs, so homeowners associations in condominiums that are want to foreclose on condo owners for unpaid maintenance fees, common area maintenance fees. Is that right? Are you still there? I think that's what you're asking me. And what I don't know is clearly there was a moratorium on evictions for direct rental payments by renters. What I don't know is whether that applied as well to homeowners association foreclosure cases as you're referring to. And so I'm going to ask you to contact my office, email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov, come right through my website. We'll try to get the answer, but I think the answer is going to be, even if they were covered, the moratoriums are over now, and the assistance would have to come from state and/or county programs that assist owners and/or renters with who are unable to pay their bills. That is something that actually the city is administering right now for the rental assistance program. But if you will contact me, I'll try to get to the bottom of that. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of a very full hour and a half. I want to say that I appreciate the civil discussion that we've had tonight. These are very critical issues. They're difficult to talk about, but as we can sort through them civilly and as fellow citizens, I think we can find solutions to all of these tough solutions. I've talked about three of them in particular: COVID-19, Afghanistan, and the infrastructure bills are all very, very difficult. But nonetheless, we have to work through them and find the best path forward through and out of them. I value our partnership. I value your advice. I value your communications. We are here to answer your questions. We're here to try to help you with your concerns. Please go to my website again at case.house.gov or call my Honolulu office, 650-6688, and we'll try to help you every way we can. Other than that, I'm going to sign off now and wish each and all of you a very fond aloha. Be safe and be well.